Welcome to this analysis. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating concept, one that actually bridges the gap between our everyday lives and the very structure of the universe. We're talking about the logical consistency of management. And by management, I mean the whole shebang, from how your local offices run all the way up to how we understand cosmic justice. The source text we're looking at today makes this absolutely brilliant logical argument about order and purpose. It shows us that structural accountability isn't just some preference, it's literally an absolute necessity.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to imagine a company, and not just your average company, right? Picture a highly ambitious one. They've got this massive overarching vision, and they're setting incredibly high targets for everyone who works there. Now, on one side, you've got a high-performing employee. This person is crushing it, hitting all the targets, totally aligned with the corporate vision, just putting in the hard work. But on the other side, you have an underperforming employee who just entirely ignores the targets. But here is the crazy twist. This company gives both of these employees the exact same reward and the exact same treatment.
So ask yourself, would you trust a company that operates like that? Would you take its management seriously at all? I mean, think about the sheer absurdity of it. If a system sets up this massive vision and has these huge expectations, but then completely fails to differentiate between the people working towards the vision and the people actively ignoring it, well, the entire structure just collapses. A system completely without consequences isn't just unfair. Structurally, it makes absolutely zero sense. The very idea of having a goal becomes entirely meaningless if the outcomes are identical no matter what you do.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how our source text takes that exact, totally relatable corporate metaphor and scales it right up to a cosmic level. It asks a really profound question from the 10th word, specifically the first truth. It asks, is it possible that a power managing the universe with such high purposes wouldn't reward those who submit and wouldn't punish those who reject? What we're doing here is looking at this theological text strictly as a neutral, logical argument about order. It's taking that exact same standard of consistency we just demanded from our hypothetical office boss and applying it to the governance of reality itself. When we map this micro analogy onto a macro scale, the parallels are honestly kind of striking. On the human-made level, you've got the boss, the employee, and the corporate vision. And on a universal scale, this is mirrored perfectly. You have the creator, humanity, and universal purpose. The argument being made in the source material is really just one of pure consistency. Think about it. If a deeply flawed human company requires strict consistency just to function as an organization, then a flawlessly managed universe, one that operates with profound care and these massive high purposes, well, it demands exactly the same thing. So the crucial point is, how do we actually define management, or dominion? True management is a system that absolutely requires the definitive separation of good and evil, or, to use our earlier business terms, separating those aligned with the vision from those who reject the vision. The source text makes the case that if a management system doesn't differentiate between those two things, the word management itself literally loses all of its meaning. We so often think of justice as this emotional demand, right? Something we just feel we deserve. But in this framework, it's framed neutrally. It's a fundamental, logical requirement. You simply cannot have a purposeful system without appropriate consequences. Which leads us to a pretty inescapable conclusion. A purposeful system must have purposeful outcomes. You can't have this grand, meticulous design on the front end, only to have complete, utter randomness on the back end. If a system claims to be driven by a high purpose, but then hands out rewards and penalties totally randomly, or worse, doesn't hand them out at all, then it's just not a true order. A random arrangement completely negates the very idea of having a grand vision in the first place. The results of the system have to reflect the intentions of the system, because otherwise the initial order is just an illusion. And this brilliantly illustrates this strict rule of cause and effect, which is ultimately confirmed in the Quran, specifically Surah Az-Zalzala. It states, "So whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil will see it." Now, in the context of our source's argument, this is presented as the perfect, logical guarantee of systemic consistency. It takes this whole idea of accountability down to literally the most microscopic level imaginable, the weight of a single atom. Every single action, positive or negative, registers within the system and produces a corresponding outcome. It is the absolute, total opposite of randomness. It's basically the guarantee that the corporate vision of the universe is tracked and managed with perfect, unflinching accuracy. So that brings us to the end of our analysis, but before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, really provocative thought to chew on. How do you judge if a system is truly fair? Do you look at its intentions, or do you look at its outcomes? Because as we've explored today through these texts, high purposes and grand intentions mean absolutely nothing if the outcomes don't logically align with them. Whether it's a corporate office downtown or the cosmos itself, the consistency of purpose demands that the end result matters just as much as the initial design. I highly encourage you to take this framework and apply it to the systems you interact with every single day. It's such a fascinating lens to view the world through. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive, and as always, keep asking those big questions.